Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of May 7th, 2025. A tremendous number of events have occurred today, so let's get started. Let's move to the line of contact. There's a lot of interesting news, and today we'll continue discussing the situation around the settlement of Kherson. Several fairly reliable sources report that over the past 24 hours, Russian sabotage groups have been observed operating near the settlement of Bohhatiska. This is effectively the fifth bridgehead, the fifth pressure point from the Russian Federation on the Ukrainian side of the Dnipro River. We can see that the Ukrainian side is apparently experiencing severe personnel shortages on their side of the river near Kherson. If the situation continues at this pace, there's an extremely high possibility, even likelihood, that the entire region could be cleared solely by Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups. We already discussed this sector in our last video, and now we see that the P-47 highway from the settlement of Pokrovsk to Bohhatiska is almost entirely under the control of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups. However, it's important to note, and always keep in mind, that this information has not yet been confirmed by any geolocated sources or map adjustments. Therefore, it's possible that this is just an escalation of tensions in the interests of one side. Next, we move to the South Donetsk direction, where the Russian armed forces continue their assault on the settlements of Novopil and Zelenopilia. Over the past day, the map has changed again, based on objective control footage published by the Ukrainian side. Here, we see a separate presidential brigade of the Ukrainian armed forces striking Russian assault units and vehicles advancing toward both Zelenopilia and Novopil. Based on this footage, we've made a slight map adjustment. Overall, we haven't just shaded the disputed territory in favor of Russia. We've even added an extra layer. Currently, according to the latest data from various cartographers and objective control footage, the distance between Russian forward positions and the settlements of Zelenopilia and Novopil is no more than 2 kilometers and 150 meters. In practical terms, this could mean just one day's worth of progress. Some pro-Russian sources, as well as neutral cartographers, report significantly deeper advances by Russian units. According to this data, the distance from Russian army positions to Novopil is already down to 1 kilometer. But again, we're approaching the May ceasefire. There's an extremely high likelihood that the Russian army will halt temporarily and not advance further toward these two settlements. However, this likely depends more on the Ukrainian side, whether Ukraine will adhere to the ceasefire. If, of course, Ukraine commits blatant violations, then the Russian army probably won't stand aside. Next, we move to the Bohhatiska direction. The map here remains unchanged. Despite all Russian attempts to gain a foothold in the southeastern part of Bohhatiska, they haven't succeeded yet. Over the past 3 or 4 days, we've received the fewest updates, suggesting that the Russian side is currently regrouping and may resume its offensive, though most likely only after the May ceasefire ends. A lot of interesting and important news is coming from the Dnipro direction, specifically Dnipropetrovsk Oblast and the settlement of Novo Pavlka. Today, a large number of markers have been added to the maps here, most of which are flag icons, indicating that over the past day, the Russian army has managed to expand its control zone slightly and further reduce the distance to the regional border. According to some neutral cartographers, the settlement of Novotroitske is already semi-encircled from the north, northeast and east. We've also received objective control footage showing strikes by Ukraine's 72nd Mechanized Brigade against Russian assault units and soldiers attempting to secure positions on the eastern outskirts of Troitske. One episode in this video was geolocated precisely in this area. Based on this footage, we've made a slight map adjustment. That is, we now have the first evidence, the first footage, confirming the entry of Russian units into the eastern part. This isn't even 10%, not even 5%, but there's definitely footage confirming the start of combat operations. Some sources also report that the Russian army has reduced the distance to the regional border to approximately 2 kilometers and 150 meters, effectively point-blank range. I'd also like to note that since the beginning of May, we've been receiving more and more footage from Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Russian drones are now flying here as if it were the front line, as if active combat were taking place. This is a very important psychological factor, a very significant psychological pressure point. Before this, if we look at the volume of updates since April 1st, the number of geolocated videos from Dnipropetrovsk Oblast was minimal, literally just one. But today alone, we've received 2 more geolocations. So gradually the front line is crossing the regional border, and the Russian army is slowly advancing into this region. Slightly to the north, Russian forces are advancing from the settlement of Uspenivka westward toward Novosergivka, as well as from Uspenivka through Novoalexandrivka, again westward toward Novomykolaivka. There's also objective control footage here. Some pro-Ukrainian sources published this video and attached coordinates to it. Ukrainian sources claim that this footage shows a counterattack by the Ukrainian army against Russian positions in the eastern part of Novosergivka. Honestly, I couldn't geolocate this video myself, but coordinates were provided. Based on this footage, we've adjusted the map. A few days ago, we already saw initial reports that Russian units had entered Novosergivka. But it appears that the Russian army not only entered, but also managed to consolidate its position. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk sector of the front. Here, only heavy artillery and aviation were active. Strikes were carried out against Ukrainian forward positions, including with Solntsepek thermobaric systems along the railway toward Novo Pavlka, as well as toward the settlement of Pokrovsk. It seems that movement here will resume soon, most likely right after the ceasefire. Strikes were also carried out against Pokrovsk itself, using FAB bombs. No active combat operations are currently taking place here. Primarily, I'll repeat, it's artillery work, FPV drone operations, and Russian airstrikes. No significant footage worth highlighting has been published. It's just a picture of heavy fighting, that's all. Next, we move to the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration near the H32 highway, which also marks the southwestern flank of the Kostiantynivka agglomeration. Here, as has become customary in recent days, we're receiving a massive amount of geolocated footage, with some of the most critical clips coming from the settlement of Novo Lenovka. Today, Russian sources published this video, where we can see Russian soldiers conducting assault operations. Based on this footage, we've fully shaded the settlement of Novo Lenovka. And in the very last seconds of this video, we can see a Russian soldier raising a flag in the northwesternmost part of the village. This allowed us to fully adjust the map. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense has not yet officially reported the clearing of the settlement. This may happen tomorrow or the day after, but there's no doubt it will occur very soon. Right now, we can see that Russian forces have effectively crossed the H32 highway from the south, meaning around this stronghold located right between these reservoirs, while Russian units have also crossed the highway from the north. In practical terms, this means the Ukrainian company stronghold positioned at the center has been cut off from normal supply routes. The Ukrainian side still has a few escape routes left. For example, one path leads west along a tree line, then across a small bridge before turning northwest toward either Popiv Yar or Poltavka. There's still a chance for Ukrainian units to hold their ground in this sector. Given that Russian forces are deploying an overwhelming number of drones here, the chances of the Ukrainian armed forces maintaining this stronghold are minimal. Additionally, over the past few days, there have been repeated reports of advances in southern Novopoltavka. We currently don't have confirmation on whether Russian units have expanded their control zone there, but it appears likely, which further diminishes the UAF's chances of holding this central stronghold between the reservoirs for long. If Russian forces fully secure this area, it could create a massive, highly strategic bridgehead for further offensives, both northeast toward Kostiantynivka and west-northwest to bypass the Pokrovsk agglomeration through Novo Ekonomikne and Rodinske. Next, we move toward the Kleban bike pocket. Today, many cartographers, mostly pro-Russian, have made map adjustments, indicating that the Russian army is gradually advancing and tightening the noose around the Kleban Beek cauldron, pushing toward Yablunivka and Oleksandro Kalinove. Several experts and cartographers have also finalized their adjustments regarding the settlement of Alexandropol. Today, only pro-Russian sources are reporting the complete clearing of the village and further advances towards Zaria. Footage has been published of FPV drone strikes on Ukrainian positions in these fields, showing multiple hits on equipment, drones, antennas, communication systems, and other Ukrainian military infrastructure. This flank remains highly active, and Russian forces continue to funnel fresh troops here, as there's clearly a localized breakthrough that could later trigger a defensive crisis along the entire Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka line. As for the Touret Sector, there are no major changes. Some map adjustments are being made, but the situation keeps fluctuating. Either the front is truly static, or Ukrainian counterattacks are creating high volatility. In short, this area is shrouded in the fog of war, making it very difficult to determine what's really happening around Touretsk. Slightly to the north, near Chasiv Yar, Russian forces have continued their offensive. As I've mentioned over the past few days, Russia has been intensifying its focus, artillery, drones, and overall pressure, on this pocket along the railway line, which extends eastward toward the Siversky-Donetsk-Donbass Canal. This is now the primary focus of the Russian armed forces. This is an extremely important and advantageous bridgehead, potentially serving as a launchpad for future offensives toward Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and Druzhkivka. The railway forms a natural defensive line, while the Siversky-Donetsk-Donbass Canal creates another. If Russian forces solidify control here, the Ukrainian side will have minimal chances of successfully counterattacking and pushing them back. We've already concluded and discussed repeatedly that this pocket is now the main focal point of Russian command. And today, the first reports have emerged confirming that the Russian armed forces have expanded their control zone northward, precisely in the direction we've been tracking. The Ukrainian side has published objective control footage showing artillery and drone strikes on Russian assault units gradually advancing into the territory of Severny Rudnik. Based on this footage, we've adjusted the map. Of course, advancing in a northwestern direction is no easy task, but at the very least, it seems Russia's immediate goal is to expand control along the Siversky-Donetsk-Donbass Canal. This is roughly what we're observing right now. Finally, we move to the Touret Sector, which has also become more active following Russia's takeover of Bilohorivka. Today, the map has been adjusted again, particularly in the northern part of Verno Kamyansk. Ukrainian sources have published objective control footage showing strikes on Russian soldiers, assault units, and infantry moving across fields in an attempt to outflank Verno Kamyansk from the north. The footage was released by the 54th Mechanized Brigade. Here, we see an episode of combat between Russian and Ukrainian soldiers somewhere in these fields. One of the episodes was geolocated precisely at this point. This allows us to conclude that Russian forces are currently trying to bypass Verno Kamyansk from the north via elevated terrain and reach its western outskirts. In any case, fighting for Verno Kamyansk has already begun. If Russian forces secure control of this settlement, it will undoubtedly simplify their operational objectives and could even allow them to straighten the front line along Vyemka, Novoselka, Verno Kamyansk, and further north toward Hrihorivka. We can see that the front is gradually shifting towards Siversk, and it's likely that combat operations, possibly even a full-scale assault, will begin there in 2025. Moving to the Lyman Sector, the most significant news is the Russian Defense Ministry's report. In its latest briefing, the ministry announced the clearing of the settlement of Lipov, located near and practically adjacent to the settlement of Novi. Based on this report, we've made a slight map adjustment. Overall, the pace of the offensive here has slowed compared to what we observed in the first half of April. It appears the Russian army is planning to complete its regrouping in this area and will likely resume active combat operations only after the ceasefire ends. There are also reports from various cartographers about minor adjustments to the front line southwest of the settlement of Makivka. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, there have been no changes over the past 24 hours. Next, we move to the northern front, where fighting continues. The most significant news comes from the Hlushkivka district and the settlement of Tetikino. A large amount of footage has been published today showing a massive number of destroyed and disabled Ukrainian vehicles. Recall that over the past 3 or 4 days, Ukrainian forces were focused on just one task: clearing minefields. There were no assaults, no attacks, just the effort to breach gaps in the Dragon's Teeth anti-tank barriers. This was the most basic, minimal objective. No attack can be launched as long as these obstacles block the path of advancing columns. They must be cleared first. Once that's done, Ukrainian infantry and assault units would receive the order: the path is open, advance. But it seems this task still hasn't been accomplished. All the engineering equipment sent on this mission has been destroyed in recent days. Yes, in some areas they may have managed to clear these obstacles, as seen in some footage, but in place of the dragon's teeth, there's now abandoned, wrecked Ukrainian equipment. Now they have to drag away not just the barriers, but also their own damaged vehicles. So, as the Russian Defense Ministry has stated, no breach of the defensive line or state border has occurred. And this appears to be accurate. However, there has been some minor progress, specifically in the settlement of Tetikino. Today, Russian sources published footage showing airstrikes on the southwesternmost part of Tetikino. Over the past few days, Ukrainian forces attempted dozens of attacks, possibly aiming to cross the Tetikino railway station and enter the settlement itself. However, every single attack was repelled. Some cartographers have made minor adjustments, but this might just involve a buffer zone. After all these failed attempts, the Ukrainian side seems to have sought at least some media victory, so they tried advancing toward Tetikino from Rizhivka via Chapaeva Street, through a small forested area that, oddly enough, provided some cover for Ukrainian FPV drones and units. They moved through these woods and emerged near Chapaeva Street, only to be immediately struck by Russian aircraft, artillery and drones. In short, no serious breakthrough or advancement was achieved here either. This is a critical factor. If we look back at 2023 to 2024, regardless of the situation on other fronts, Ukraine always retained the potential to launch offensives. We witnessed one such operation in Kursk Oblast's Sudzha district. Yes, it ultimately ended in defeat, but initially we're talking about the very potential to attack. Now, as of April-May 2025, these attempts near Tetikino, as well as the attacks toward Demidivka and Popivka, suggest that Ukraine may have even lost this offensive potential. And if Ukraine completely loses the ability to attack, the next question becomes, does it still have the capacity to defend? That's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and take care.